Hello everybody and welcome to another video. I'm going to be talking again about Guild Wars Reforged today. This episode is going to be kind of pulling double duty. We're going to do some classic Q&A, response and feedback from you guys, since we did a good 2-hour-long discussion yesterday. There are a lot of thoughts and opinions going on about Reforged. And also I just wanted to give you some news, because there was of course the official live stream, and there's been a little bit of movement on Reddit and Twitter and stuff, so I thought I'd sum that up. Some of which is actually quite exciting and has a couple of clarifications about, you know, some of the things we were being Debbie Downers about in the previous part. So first of all, I just thought this was funny. This was staring me in the face on my feed when I woke up this morning. Guild Wars 1's Twitter active once more. I think their last tweet, I might be wrong about this, but I think their last tweet this year was way back with the anniversary celebration. And here they're doing like trading cards, I guess, sort of reminiscent things, which feels very fun and appropriate, you know, for this game with its roots in MTG and, you know, its combat system. Hopefully we'll see lots more of these as they go along. They're kind of like mini lore primers, I suppose, for people who are interested in jumping in. I like how the tweet actually says, no, go out, and for people who are going to be heading out to battle fighting the Char today. It's not like they're holding everything off for the actual launch of Reforged, which ultimately is just a game update. They're talking about Guild Wars as a thing that's there, that's active, that's doing things right now. And I think that's really powerful and important, and I hope to see they keep doing stuff like this, not just around Reforged's launch, but, you know, just off into the future. I mean, why put that Twitter down? Why let it fall to the wayside? We did, of course, talk yesterday about how they've revamped their official website as well, and, you know, these are all fun, positive initiatives. More on the more tangible newsy side, over on Reddit, Dr. SCW, game director, you know, long-term vision and project runner for Guild Wars 1, who's always had massive, brilliant responses over on Reddit. I love this guy, by the way. He worked on Azeric. I met him in real life. He gave me some sheet music from Azeric. I have the map for that game. The guy is amazing, really friendly. Love this dude. He has this to say about the Reforged project, and I guess a little on why, at least in his mind, it's a justified name. He says, that's very kind. It takes a village, as they say. The 2-week staff were already up to speed with our code base, so they jumped right in, and I'm bad at UI programming, and they're good. The integrated controller support goes deep into the UI system as well as the game, so the controller support is context sensitive to what you're doing. And that's true. I talked about this, guys. If you guys caught the live stream, you'll know this as well now at this point. But like when you walk over, say, an item that you can pick up on the floor, it'll actually have a pop-up on screen saying press X, if that's your bind, to collect gold or to pick up this rare or whatever. You know, it is doing new fancy things. The UI elements of this Reforged release are far and away the biggest, most exciting, innovative, and fun elements of what's happening here. But he goes on and he says, and our marketing staff had to switch gears from the Visions of Eternity launch to this in very short order. And the studio management had to agree that this was a good investment. And our player voice group organised a lot of play sessions with internal staff and alpha players. And he actually verified on the official stream that they put Guild Wars 1 on controller in front of people who had never played the game before, just to see how they'd pick it up and, you know, actually respond to that and whether it was working well, and it did, and it does. And our customer service crew reviewed what we're doing to ensure that they can actually support it. And our sales team worked with us on the simplified product offerings. Interestingly, our head of sales has been working with Valve on how to properly have Guild Wars Reforged on Steam without it breaking for existing players. And we surprised our QA team with a request for a smoke test just a few days ago. So overall, it is a lot of effort across many teams. The game feels reforged to me. And, you know, I think, at least from this perspective, he does have a point. That there's a lot of dust and a lot of cogs that need to move and a lot of ideas that just were not doing anything. And then all these facets of the studio have kind of rumbled into life. So in terms of how they think of the product, even though, you know, there aren't content updates or whatever you might expect to come from a full-blown remaster, which the title Reforged suggests it would be, and I don't blame anyone for being misled by that. In terms of how they think of it, yes, Guild Wars 1 is kind of reforged and doing things. And that is a fair point, I think. My only quibble with this, and I would like to see a communication from the studio or an interview with someone or something at some point, is, you know, right now they're collaborating with 2 weeks. You know, presumably that will come to an end at some point. 2 weeks presumably has aspirations and ideals outside of Guild Wars 1. So, like, how long is that support going to last? Once that does come to a conclusion, are we going to see some people permanently a part of Arenanet working on the Guild Wars 1 side stuff? Maybe I'm wrong with my guess. Maybe they can just work with 2 weeks forever with Guild Wars 1. But something about that feels like it might not be the case. But yeah, a nice little quote from him here. Just moving on then to the official stream. I will try to get some footage of the background for you guys that's more meaningful than just standing in the goddamn Zaician menagerie for this video. So what they're doing is running around pre-steering. You can see the UI there and make of it what you will. Unfortunately, it was kind of like the format of the show they did meant it was picture-in-picture the whole time. What we really want to do is sit and look at the new rendering capabilities and really feel, you know, how fresh it looks and really scrutinize the new UI and stuff. And you kind of can't. So I've blown it up here and cropped out all the other stuff, so you're just seeing the footage itself. It was kind of low FPS for a while. They did assure us that they were running at a really high frame rate, and you know, don't worry about it. It's not badly optimized or whatever. But in terms of like what we can actually see the difference, it's a bit tricky. In fact, I asked my community in Discord, hey guys, you watched the stream, what did you think of the graphics? And I got this response that, you know, people couldn't really see the difference, and that's the same for me. I couldn't really see the difference either, and I don't think you guys should go into this expecting very much. I think the 2018 update was worth a hell of a lot more. But there were some good anecdotes and insights that came from the conversation between them. First of all, they talked about how they have kind of reconfigured the idea of the bonus mission pack and Eye of the North as proper formal DLCs. The Steam implementation of Guild Wars 1 as it currently stands is very fiddly. They like hand you product keys and you have to go and manually enter the product keys. All of that's been cleaned up, and so obviously that's just kind of nice, but they did explicitly say that this would be nice if they ever wanted to sell more DLCs. There is no confirmation they're going to do it, but if that was going to be something they'd want to do, and it really honestly sounded like that was a real if. You know, they actually have the infrastructure for that now. So, you know, you might see more, you know, the bonus mission pack 2, I could imagine might be something in scope. You might see, and this obviously isn't coming from them, something as big as Eye of the North one day is the absolute dream, of course. But I won't get us all on the hype train for that. With it, they did also talk about new prices, by the way. It sounds like the price for Eye of the North at some point might be coming down. And as you heard me talk about in the previous video, I do think that the current Reforged bundle is a joke, really. It's not value enough. It should have had Eye of the North in it. So at least they're going to be lowering that. Possibly some other microtransactions too. Now, I never mentioned this before, but originally when they were talking about this, they did mention that they're hoping to look into the old in-game store, which used to be connected to some like old NCSoft stuff that all went down, and now you kind of have to use the official Guild Wars 1 website. If you guys remember back in April with the anniversary, I bought loads of stuff. I really wanted to support the game. I wanted to signal to Arenanet people will spend money, so I bought like all my bank tabs and stuff like that. They were all on big deep discounts earlier this year, and you know, to do that you have to go onto the official Guild Wars website. They're looking to bring back the real in-game UI and stuff, which would be very, very, very cool if it happens. Another little anecdote that I really liked hearing them talk about was, you know, one of the guys from 2 Weeks was originally a map editor on Guild Wars 1, and when they started collaborating this year, they went back and got all their old like mapping tools and all these old services and things that they used to use to make the game that had just been kind of collecting dust. They have rebuilt and they've looked through. They describe themselves as having gone spelunking for certain things that are now working again, and I believe the quote is, "We're trying to figure out the scope if we were gonna put more content in." Like, it's not a lie. It's not we'll just say that to get people in the door. They really, to my impression of them, is they really seriously are looking to see if they can put more content in this game. It's just they have more things to spin up, and look, they're collaborating with people who are best equipped to be able to do that are best equipped to be able to look through that giant bowl of spaghetti and, you know, make a meal out of it, to excuse a terrible metaphor there. So, like, they talked as well about, like, they had no logging tools, or their logging tools were really old. They didn't have a way of tracking at what exact moment it is players get burnt out of the game and uninstall. But they can do that now, you know, and that's just kind of crazy to think that they can do that, but they can do that, so they might be able to make improvements and things at those specific areas where people are struggling with prophecies, you know, getting burnt out because of the mazes, or because it's too hard, or this, that, or the other thing. Again, at no point is there any confirmation they're doing any of this, and that's what I'm really looking for. But it seems like there's an authentic desire to maybe do things. I don't think it would be fair or accurate journalism. Is that what this is? Journalism? If I didn't also point out, there was another quote that was a bit more disappointing to me, where SCW specifically said, "We're not here to change the game people love. We're here to make it more accessible to more people. They also said that, which is very like, okay, yeah, they're just going to try to be able to sell it on more platforms and get a bit more money out of it, because that's what NCSoft would actually like. Which makes sense and is, the realistic thing. So we'll see. Hopefully that's more of a short-termy kind of quote, and sort of their focus for now is that. And they'll expand if people support this. And, I've been very conflicted with my coverage of this so far, because I think, the thing I want to do is get online and be really hyped about it and encourage everyone in the best way possible so that it gets the money, so that we get the content. It's a very chicken and the egg type situation. One final quote that I thought was interesting and I quite liked was they talked about Toolbox. Toolbox is kind of the big add-on for Guild Wars 1. I use it all the time. It's got incredible amounts of expanded functionality for the game. We have seen over recent years, Arenanet have seen stuff they've done with Toolbox and said, oh, okay, we're going to just do that natively with the client. They basically said that they've collaborated closely with Toolbox. They're not trying to break Toolbox. And we actually got a really well-considered third-party program policy, mindset out of this. Here's what they said. They said, as long as you're not botting, cheating, or automating things, we're fine with what you do. They said, if your client can see it, we think it's okay that you should be able to see it. So if Toolbox exposes details that they're in your client and just makes them more evident, they're fine with that. They said, if we don't think you should see it, we're not going to send it to your client. Like, they consider that to be a thing on their end. That's a brilliant statement. That really establishes the boundaries. And I want to see something like that for Guild Wars 2, which is currently going through a real transformative period as, add-ons are going bonkers over on Guild Wars 2 side. If you've been watching my Visions of Eternity Let's Play, you will know a little bit about that. We've done a few conversations there. So there you go. It was an hour-long show. That's basically the goodies. The rest of it was basically Lara trying to get them to confirm more. But obviously they weren't going to do that. So let's move on. I want to talk, we're going to segue into the first comment, which I've got a lot to respond to. And, after a bit of reflection, I think it's regarding the main topic here, really, which is that I think we're all excited to see an update for Guild Wars. Some of us own Steam Decks, and we're really excited to play. Some of us have the disposable income to now go buy a Steam Deck, or a Steam controller, by the way, and play the game there. A lot of us are excited that there's a media event, whether it's earned or not, right? We're excited that there's a media event that means there'll be a lot of people, and it feels like a meaningful time to jump into the game. It's just that question of how they presented it, and the fact that they've called it Reforged, and that the title screen will be Reforged, and presumably it'll be listed on Steam as Guild Wars Reforged. But did it really earn the name Reforged? I think, for me, the answer to that is no, and I'm a little bit disappointed with how the marketing guys handled that specific aspect of the release. It is kind of a quibble, but that's all it really comes down to, I think. I think they call it Reforged. Let's ignore the whole Warcraft thing. It's suggestive to people that this is a remaster or even a remake. I mean, I had comments of people saying, hey, is this an entirely new Guild Wars game? I mean, Christ. And just to show you guys how deceptive this was, or misleading this was, I did a video earlier this year, called Dreams of a Guild Wars Remaster, in which I discussed the pros and cons of a remaster, whether it was copium, whether it was realistic, what we would actually see, and so on and so on. What I woke up to on my feed yesterday was all these comments. Here, I'll scroll through them on screen for you guys. These people saying, and the dream came true. I bring you tidings of great joy. Sometimes dreams do come true. I'm from the future and I'm here to tell you your dream has come true. People telling me that there's a remaster. These are people that heard about Reforged and have been misinformed, so I've had equally as many people saying, wow, why is this even a conversation? It's very obvious that it's not. I agree, when you actually look at the release, it's not. Thankfully, most people don't double down once they realize, what's blatantly obvious, but, I've had this guy who did. So here's the first comment. This is truly an obscene comment. It starts with a very snobby, condescending opening message, completely lacking in social skills. But here, this comment says, TIL, WP doesn't know what a remaster is and seems to be thinking of a remake. What is a remaster? Taking an old game, updating the graphics, audio, and QOL to modern technological standards without recreating things from scratch. That's what Reforged does. It just retains the same server progression, etc., but fixes and improves graphics and audio to modern technology. So yes, it is a remaster, even if they're not calling it. It's not a remake, a reboot, or a re-release, or a relaunch, but it is a remaster. I've read some stupid comments in my time. I've read some comments, you know, they'll get like one thing wrong, maybe two. This is just an avalanche of half-wittedness. Okay, so let's take this quote. A remaster, according to this person who thinks they have an authority on what a remaster is or isn't, and they don't, but they say updating an old game's graphics, audio, and QOL to modern technological standards. That's it, is it? That's the whole bar for a remaster. Okay, so if that's the criteria, then the 2018 patch that improved our view distance, that was a remaster. It was an old game, they dealt with the graphics, they updated it to more modern technological standards, so let's call that a remaster. If that's the criteria, then the new engine capabilities that came in with Eye of the North, remember when they added the new post-processing and it was a little bit more taxing on our systems, but it looked a bit better? Well, Eye of the North wasn't just an expansion, Eye of the North was a remaster. If that's the case, then the Shadows update we just got with the launch of Visions of Eternity in Guild Wars 2, I didn't realize it, guys, I should have been talking about this, but that was a remaster. Did you realize Guild Wars 2 was remastered? Do you know what? I didn't realize, but Guild Wars 2's actually had multiple remasters. Do you guys remember the remaster when they added that high DPI checkbox so that when you were on a really high resolution monitor, it would match the Windows resolution? That was pretty cool. Hell, if that's the only criteria, then the patch that came to Guild Wars 1 in April when SCW capped the FPS to 90 to stop rubber banding, well look, that was an old game that dealt with the graphics and it fit it to modern technological standards. Reforged isn't the first remaster, it's like the 4th or 5th for Guild Wars 1. Obviously, this is nonsense. A remaster has to be something more than that. Hell, Guild Wars 2 updated its DirectX environment and still didn't have the guts to call itself a remaster. If the argument is, oh, but it has to bundle lots of things together at once, it's not a remaster because they did it incrementally, well, again, let's look at 2018 for Guild Wars 1. These are the patch notes. I've got the screenshots. Added an ultra shadow setting. Doubled the distance of the shadows. Doubled the resolution. Quadruple the amount of dynamic shadows. The fog haze, when used advanced graphics options, been modified. The game starts properly into windowed full screen. The loading screen fade effect was sped up. They increased the FOV and gave us a slider for it. They let us zoom the camera out further than the max distance. This was a far more substantial graphics update than Reforged, and this was still not a remaster. Any amount of critical thinking from a normal human will reveal how absurd this is. You can't declare any improvement to any aspect of the game and just say it's a remaster because actually they're remastering this element so it fits the criteria. And what does Reforged do? Let's actually look at what Reforged does. It restores EAX audio, so the game is back to sounding how it was 15 years ago. It's effectively a bug fix. It restores bloom functionality at high resolutions so that bloom displays how it originally did 15 years ago. That's not a remaster as much as it is a restoration. It adds a couple of things. FXAA, something people can and do run anyway. They're not adding DLAA. They're not adding temporal AA of any form. They're not even adding SMAA. Sorry, what did you just say about modern technological standards? Because FXAA is not it. Ambient occlusion is kind of a cool update, but here, even on today's stream, the developers said it's tuned super subtle, it's more of a tip of the hat to the previous limitations, it's something you might only spot when zooming in close on model and armor details. You cannot see the difference on this footage. Secondly, you say that remasters don't recreate things from scratch? What? Remasters do recreate things from scratch. The Oblivion remaster from this year, and admittedly a good one, built entirely new models, textures, and shader effects for the entire game. Even it did not call itself a remake, it called itself a remaster. Do you know why? Because it has the same gameplay and the same underlying script engine, but it still had new assets, even fairly cheaply made and quick to turn around remasters, like the recent Aspire Tomb Raiders or any of the Aspire remasters, really. They all have new stuff, whether that be handcrafted textures or AI up-resed ones that they then tweak or what. You know, let's not get into the ethics of AI up-resing textures. Even those remasters have new stuff. That's the bar. Yes, remasters do have new assets, and do you know why? Because they wouldn't sell otherwise. They wouldn't be worth the hype. It is perfectly reasonable for one of these people who's been duped into thinking this is a remaster to expect new assets. And then they're going to be disappointed when they find out that that's not the case. This comment is mired in arrogant bullshit. A remaster versus a remake is not a fixed, well-defined thing. It's a flexible definition defined by marketing teams and studios and how specific communities react to specific products. It's not a hard science. It's not one of those things you can just put in a little box and declare is or isn't so. So therefore, no one should be upset about Reforged. And you know what? At the end of the day, after all this ranting I've just done, if Arenanet felt this was a remaster, they would call it a remaster. They didn't. At no point have they. And even on today's stream, they clarified out loud, it is not a remaster. I mean, what kind of person denies what the studio is outright telling them? Oh, jeez. There is a little more, would you believe it, from this comment, this edit, which again is still full of nonsense. So they take issue with the fact I said that Arenanet are monetizing Guild Wars 1 again. He says, but no, because it's free to old players. Look, this means nothing. Your reading comprehension could do some real work here. My comment wasn't they're monetizing it again for us veterans who have already bought it. No. I made no comment about veterans. My comment was they are monetizing Guild Wars 1 again, which they are. That's indisputable. They are finding a new way to sell Guild Wars 1. This is a remonetization scheme as much as the Guild Wars Trilogy box release was way back in the heyday, as much as the Guild Wars Complete Collection was, as much as indeed the Anniversary Masterpiece Collection was that they released this April, and which was actually a very high value proposition, by the way. Speaking of which, next quote. You say you complain that they've always repackaged the trilogy. Sure, but that was $30, now it's $20. Whoop-de-doo, guys! You get to save $10 on a very old game, on a trilogy package, which regularly goes on sale, for the past 15 years has regularly gone on sale on Steam, from 75 to 80% off. Seriously, go look at Steam charts, look at price history. This stuff that they're going to be selling you when it comes to Steam Deck, it's regularly down to just a fiver. £5. And what, I'm supposed to tell my audience in this video that no, the privilege of paying 20 for it the day it comes out on the Steam Deck is somehow a better deal for them. It's not a better deal for them. I'm sorry if you feel I'm being a Debbie Downer about that, but it's just not realistic. It's not a good deal. This thing needed to include Eye of the North if it was going to get me excited about that price point. And if anything there, just to reduce the friction of the experience for most people. Because if you do have Eye of the North at the start, you can get into the better presented stuff and, you know, maybe skip there for some heroes if you're so inclined. You know, I'm not necessarily endorsing that, but there it is. And finally, you say you complain that there isn't a full pack, but there is. It's called the Anniversary Edition. We're all well aware that there's an Anniversary Edition. I didn't complain about that. I complained that this isn't the full pack. Today's live stream comments saying Eye of the North might be a bit cheaper. Okay, that might go somewhere, but I don't know. I still don't think that this was very good. This comment blew my mind. Whew, okay, let's move on. Next question. This is from No More Najmal, who said, I was so confused when everyone was talking about a remaster. I was wondering what I was missing. It sounded more like what you described, WP. Improvements that are nice, but nothing game-changing. Thanks for the video. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, crazy world. Who would think this is a remaster? All right, so this next comment is a bit of a mea culpa on my part. I think I was a little bit unfair in the last part, and I've had a few comments from people basically with this general sentiment. So if you've dropped a comment like this, just know that I probably read it, and you know, I'm kind of responding to all of you collectively here. So the Ace of Wolf 01 says, an official Steam input layout is nice, ... but that doesn't give you a good experience unless the game understands a controller. The game needs to show the correct inputs needed for a good experience, and they wouldn't be getting the Steam Deck verified if this wasn't happening. So it's more than just the input layout. And I think you guys are totally right about this. With the actual announcement, I was thinking about the fact that they did already have Steam controller layouts in beta. I was thinking about the fact that I used to play Guild Wars 1 with my own X-Padder profile way back in the day, and I get that that's a lot of friction that it's nice to not have to deal with anymore. But you guys are right. You know, like the fact that this new update is actually going to show what your binds are there on the screen, it is a big deal, and it is nice, like watching their gameplay, the footage you can see in the background, actually watching how the analog stick movement really nicely works here. I don't know whether it's going to be a thing where if you slightly press the analog stick, your character can walk. I doubt they've done that. there is kind of walking in Guild Wars 1 if you have like some kind of big movement modifier on you, like a water magic hex or something. I doubt they've gone to that length, and we certainly don't actually see it in any of the footage, so certainly not. But in terms of the UI actually showing the binds, you guys are right. I think this is bigger than I was giving it credit for. It's not just the beta that was going to end anyway ending. They've gone above and beyond. I don't know whether that was worth the whole Reforged designation, but it was worth some press, and it was worth some fanfare. And at the end of the day, we should celebrate those things, because they're a chance for more people to get into Guild Wars. Another clarification and exciting thing that you guys pointed out, and they talked a little bit about on today's stream as well. This is from Anna, who says, Guild Wars 2 Steam accounts log in directly via Steam, and thus cannot be linked to the old, current Guild Wars 1, which uses the native launcher and original email login. Reforged changes that, so that Steam players who only have Guild Wars 2 on Steam will also be able to make progress on their Hall of Monuments. Any newly purchased Guild Wars 1 in Steam will automatically be linked. At least that's what I gathered from the available info. Yeah, and they did clarify that on stream. So I believe how it will work is when you boot Reforged, you don't then also have to log in again separately or whatever. You're just in straight away. It's all the same thing. Steam recognizes that. The two games recognize that. And it does cross-pollinate your rewards. As for people who own Guild Wars 2 off of Steam, but Guild Wars 1 on, or vice versa, I don't know like whether every iteration is accounted for, but this is a nice bonus, and the Hall of Monuments at the end of the day is one of the best things for people to actually have an incentive to play Guild Wars 1, because it gets you AP, and it gets you mini-pets, and all that good stuff. Next we have, I've got two comments together, and they're kind of like hardcore Debbies, alright? They're much more hardcore in the world of Debbiness than me. Let's see what they have to say, and whether we agree. NPLM says, I love Guild Wars 1, but I don't want them to make any new content for it. Any more content for it. I don't think they have the creative ability or the interest. Guild Wars 2 had some fantastic gameplay moments, but the lore as depicted in-game was terrible. It felt like it was filtered through a children's story, and I would be afraid that that same filter would be applied to any new Guild Wars 1 content. The other comment here from Elfin Spartan says, honestly, I'm glad this isn't a remaster. I frankly worry that any remaster of Guild Wars 1 would be Disney-fied for a non-existent modern audience as Guild Wars 2. Seriously, by the end of Dragons, the char weren't threatening, the dialogue was full of millennial lingo, and the art style had shifted so much that it reminded me more of something Disney Star Wars would cough up. They literally killed off the Ministry of Purity, the one group of villains we all wanted most to face off against off-screen because it would have been too problematic. That's when I put Guild Wars 2 down, and I've never picked it back up. I'm as happy as a clam for QOL improvements, but dear God, please, no remasters. Hell, not even new content, not with the current culture war nonsense. No matter which side they would pander to, it would hurt the game. Not least because I'd play Guild Wars 1 to go back to a time before this nonsense. All my angst and annoyance aside, I'm glad to see that they're still serious about supporting Guild Wars 1, as it's one of the very few games I still bother to play nowadays. This is all great news. So to the both of you, I mean, there's so much we could talk about here. I got kind of three main points I want to make here. One is this. Look, you have to have a little trust. You have to have a little faith somewhere. Because otherwise, like, what's the point in following the news? What's the point in ever thinking about Guild Wars 1 again, right? Because, like, if you just 100% have zero faith, you dismiss anything they will ever do ever again for whatever reasons, like, why are you here? There's nothing to look at anymore. Just cherish your memories of Guild Wars 1. Play Guild Wars 1 as it currently exists. Don't buy this prospective remake or remaster or whatever, which isn't a product that actually exists, right? But if they ever did do that, another 5 years down the road or whatever, if they did release Utopia and so on, just disconnect yourself from it. I don't know what there is to gain sort of half following the game when you have absolutely no faith. And I do think that that lack of faith is a bit silly. So here's my other 2 points to this, right? One, it's not a monolith. There's not one writer that wrote everything that ever happened in Guild Wars 2. Different creative minds contributed to the movement of the world, then contributed to the dynamic events that came in at Guild Wars 2, that contributed to Season 1, that contributed to Season 2, that contributed to Heart of Thorns. Different constraints and budgets affected all of this. You know, if End of Dragons disappointed you, that doesn't mean condemn the whole game. And elements of End of Dragons disappointed me too. That doesn't mean condemn the whole game, right? Like, I take Secrets of the Obscure completely on its own basis because different people come in, different people go out, as well as individual creative minds grow and change, right? Someone might think something was a fascinating story when they wrote it in their mid-20s and think something completely different when they're, in their early 40s. That applies to Guild Wars 1 too. Not to mention, here's my third major point, they're not fans. They're professional writers. They're professional game designers. They understand that different products have different markets and different tones. If you play Guild Wars 1, you get that it has that veneer of epic fantasy. You get that there's a certain scope, there's a certain style that goes with the storytelling that might not necessarily mesh. And they understand that. You have to give them the credit of the fact that they know the product they're making. When these people talk about these games, when they show themselves on stream and stuff, I don't see phonies. I really don't. I see people who actually love the games and actually play the games, and they get the vibe. They get what was so exciting and thrilling about tidbits about who Abaddon was before he fell as a god or whatever. They get what's thrilling about the data mined information at the end of Nightfall. They get it. So call me naive, but I would say have a little faith that they can write to a community, that they can understand a product, and that they would give you the thing that you're looking for, right? They're not going to try and fit square pegs into round holes. I mean, maybe I can see an argument that long-term they'd end up doing that, but I mean, when we're in this world where they're making a bid to get these Guild Wars 1ers back, they're going to think about that stuff. And thirdly and finally, Guild Wars 1 isn't high art. And Guild Wars 1 isn't as good as probably a lot of us remember. Guild Wars 1 was likewise filled with pop culture references and nonsense. And Guild Wars 1 itself made its own missteps. Here's a silly thing that I was always grumpy about. I didn't like the real-life regular glasses that came in with Eye of the North. Remember, you could actually get glasses as a headpiece? I thought that looked too modern. I thought that didn't really fit with the aesthetic of the game. I didn't like that. But huge amounts of other players accepted it and enjoyed it and played with it. And at the end of the day, that's what Guild Wars 1 is. So if they did more updates where they sold, new outfits or microtransactions that sort of followed that art style, I couldn't rightly sit here and complain in 2025 that that's new and they don't get it. I mean, they were doing that even back in the day. So yeah, on this note, I get why some people feel this way, and these are very, very big products that have gone through so many different development ups and downs that there's going to be something that you fell out of alignment with more than the other things. But I think if you're going to be a fan, you got to be a bit level-headed about this stuff. You got to chill out, and you got to have a little bit of trust that someone can write a story that will satisfy you. Don't go too far. This is too doomery. That's how I feel, anyway. Next, we got another pair of comments. This is from SaulRam91 first, who says, I did a playthrough of all the campaigns on the Steam Deck a few years back. So, wow, someone's already done it. Well, I got about halfway and I stopped, they say. If they're going to say it's Steam Deck verified, then I hope they fix the trash experience of the game losing your place in a mission if you have to log out. The whole point of the deck is taking games on the go and picking up and dropping on the fly. Hard to do that in one of the many ridiculous 2-hour-long missions, knowing if you DC or log out, you lose all progress. And the other comment I have to pair with this seems a little unrelated, but I don't think really is Aiko Tactics, who says Guild Wars Switch 2. Which is another really great idea, that, especially in the live stream, I saw a lot of people were asking for, will you release the Switch? I think that is a very natural move, guys. I think it does make sense. Releasing Guild Wars on Switch or Switch 2, that's quite, I think it could run it. And, once they've got the control scheme and everything set up, maybe that's the sort of thing that 2 weeks are going to be looking into. When I hear that quote at the start where they're saying we're trying to get it in make it accessible to as many people as possible, maybe a Switch port is on the cards. But it comes back to this thing about the mission length and the logout scenario, because I think this is right, and it's been a thing about, like with mobile gaming especially. Guild Wars isn't that suited for handheld, and I think a lot of us are kind of ignoring that. Not all missions are ridiculous 2-hour-long slogs. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. Maybe if you have a very poorly optimized team and you're doing quite endgamey things. I would say most missions you can get through in about half an hour, even for sort of a casual first-time play, which is an experience I had very recently going through Prophecies, where many of the missions were quite long. When we get to stuff like Vanquishing and vanquishing big like Central Tyrian maps where there's like one patrol that's running in circles, yeah, that can get a bit brutal, especially if you're not in an area where, you can trust your battery will last. The question is, will 2 weeks, will Arenanet do anything about this? I don't know whether they can. as the game currently stands, if you disconnect, they do hold the micro server up for you, right? They hold that instance ready for you to reconnect. I don't know what the timeout is. Is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? All I know is I remember from playing Guild Wars 1, before that lockout reconnect thing was added, you used to just spend your entire time playing this game shitting yourself, hoping that you wouldn't get locked out for a long time. The reconnect button was awesome. It also used to be that if you clicked the reconnect button too fast, you'd get locked out for good. So hopefully that's not a thing. Maybe they can extend that. Maybe they can hold the servers open for people for a little bit long. What would we find tolerable, though? You know, when I think about people gaming on the go, I think about it, you know, maybe you're in an Uber, or you're on a train on the way to work or something. You're not leaving for just 40 minutes. You're not leaving for just an hour. You're leaving for your shift at work or to go to school or whatever you're up to. And they're not going to hold it open all day for you. So they can probably only mitigate it to a certain degree. It would have been nice, or I should say it will be nice, to see any communication from the studio about that, because I think it's a big thing. And when we talk about going to Switch as well, I think it will continue to be a good topic. It's one of those things that you don't really think about until you're actually in the reality of playing the game. Another pair of comments here, because those are fun, right? We've got Peachy. I always love seeing Peachy in the comments. She said, great point about Arenanet proving they can actively support multiple products so that players can have confidence Guild Wars 2 won't be abandoned when their inevitable next game launches. And yeah, I agree. That's totally something worth underlining. And to continue on this, we've got somebody who says, I had a funny moment of somewhat deja vu regarding your segment here about Guild Wars 1 players being salty about Guild Wars 2 players. In PoE 2, till today, you get the exact same sentiment shared by PoE 1 players whenever Grinding Gear Games shifts their focus to the sequel. At this point, it's pretty clear that GGG is going for PoE 1 League, PoE 2 League cycle, and they're not abandoning PoE 1. But you still get PoE 1 players who get salty and rage comment on the PoE 2 YouTube comments every single time that game starts a new league. At the very start of Path of Exile 2, this PoE 1 player negative sentiment was far more pronounced, as PoE 1 stagnated for a very long time while GGG was fixing PoE 2. But at this point, it's very clear they're supporting both games. The parallels between Guild Wars 1 and 2 and PoE 1 and 2 are amusingly similar, but with a caveat that GGG actually did not outright abandon the first game when the second came out, unlike what Arenanet did. Hindsight is 2020, but GGG handled their two games superbly right at the start of PoE 2 compared to what Arenanet did, dragging their feet for 20 years. This is a really great topic. I actually think I disagree. I think that the Path of Exile situation currently happening, or maybe is getting put to bed at the moment, I don't know, I haven't followed it for a few months, is a really good warning and something for Arenanet to look at, to be scared of. My understanding with the Path of Exile 1 versus 2 thing is GGG announced their sequel and they said immediately, we're not abandoning PoE 1. They're actually going to be slightly different paces, slightly different genres, to which everyone was satisfied, right? But then they dragged their heels for a little while, getting back to Path of Exile 1, or they didn't do enough, right? And that's what really set people off into a frenzy. Arenanet sidestepped all of that. Arenanet never said anything about Guild Wars 1, really. They let it quietly die. I think that Arenanet were actually more savvy, and it took, you know, a good 12 months. It got, like, till those Season 1 days for the GW1 players to start getting really upset. I do remember right around Eye of the North's announcement, there were some grumbling, but that died pretty quickly because of the Hall of Monuments. So I actually thought Arenanet did pretty good, and it was only, like, far later there was this bubbling resentment. And that resentment came from people realizing Guild Wars 2 is a very different genre, or maybe quibbles with the storytelling, like we heard from some people just now, and then it became full-blown animosity afterwards. But for the actual transition, I think Arenanet handled it really well, and GGG are actually doing something kind of dodgy at the moment, where it feels like they're going A to B to A to B to A to B. I think what's crucial for Arenanet is to always make it clear that these are separate development streams that never, like, pilfer one from the other. They are not the same devs. They are not the same resources. No one is cannibalizing anything. And that is what I want to see. Then people will feel kind of settled about Guild Wars 1 being a bit slower. It's just because they have less devs. And they're not stealing from Guild Wars 2. I don't want to be in the reverse situation either, where, you know, the next Guild Wars 2 mini-X pack comes out, and everyone says, oh, it's because they've been focusing on Reforged. No. Make it clear that they are completely separate, And, you know, this is a small thing going on with Reforged, and let's not be angry, right? And I do view the studio as the parent in the room. I think most, you know, gamers will be idiots, and they will get console worry about it. And Arena just have to mitigate that as best as possible. And all of these topics are going to be so much more pronounced and important once that, as Peachy was talking about, once that Guild Wars 3 thing comes. So Arenanet can see what they can learn there. But yeah, if GGG's given people in their community the impression that they have to flex from left to right, oh no, that's not good. I don't want to see that for Guild Wars 1, 2, or Project Tyria, or whatever happens down the road. The Nomad Luck had this to say, and I'm being really horrible putting this comment on here. All right. The Nomad Luck is excited about Reforged and says, just the fact that pre-searing will be full again is fucking awesome. See you on December 3rd. All right, look, I have to say, pre-searing is already full. I think this is my main thing about this announcement. It's already full. Pre-searing is one of the areas of the game that has never died. Like, round the clock, you can go to pre-searing. There will be multiple districts. There's economies in pre-searing. There are YouTubers covering pre-searing and, like, using charcoal as currencies because it's a rare salvage from steel ingots and stuff. Pre-searing is, like, we didn't need Reforged for this. And there's kind of a funny mindset going on here, you know, where it's like people feel like they can't get into it until there's like this media announcement. They couldn't get into it until the 20th. They couldn't. But, you know, these games are alive. Kamadan has always been there. It has always been active. It's been active in, you know, when Zaishan dailies reset, you've been able to go to Outposts and see people in LFG and play those. Nothing has been holding you back. I know it's this weird thing with gaming. It's not just a Guild Wars 1 thing, but when we move on from a game, we tend to think it's dead, right? Like, I tend to think of the Star Trek MMO as dead, or the Lord of the Rings MMO as dead, or, you know, oh, nobody's there. But actually, you play these games, and there are communities, and they will embrace you, and you can do things. We didn't need Reforged for this. But, you know, and, you know, there is a line as well where practically the increased player base doesn't even mean anything. As long as there's like 2 to 3 districts in pre-searing, does it matter that when Reforged comes out, we're going to see 20 districts for a couple of weeks? Not really. I mean, it'll be cool. But the bar is quite low, actually, for a game to feel active and to work out. Guild Wars has an active economy. A kind of exploded economy, right, for the prices of things, but it's there. And I just want to encourage people, right? I don't know, whoever you are listening to my voice right now, if it's a couple of years down the line and somehow, for some reason, you're watching this video, just trust. People will be there in Guild Wars 1, and every day is a good day to pick it up. Actually, I'll tell you what, one of those sales where it gets really cheap is a good day. There will be a community. It's your boy Kenny says, please tell me they're fixing the broken waterfall sounds. Yes, they are. This is what EX will do. I've ran the mod before. It will fix the rivers, it will fix the waterfalls, and it will sound good. I mean, it's not going to blow your mind. I wouldn't be so grandiose as to say that the audio is remastered, but I would say it's fixed. Oh, and by the way, on that note, I did also ask the 2 weeks guys about the bonus, like, audio, you know, the extra tracks that you had to unlock and are currently a bit clunky. And I didn't really get a response on that, so I don't know whether they'll be included or they know about those, or was that already resolved? Not sure on those ones. Donut here says, RE the content they're receiving for $20. Do not forget that new players will also be getting the Warring Crier and the Winds of Change content along with the purchase, both of which are interesting pieces of content. Yeah, I don't deny that they're interesting pieces of content. Is that how it works? They'll definitely have them, but they don't really make much sense if you haven't played Eye of the North, right? Like, you wouldn't know who Zin is. You wouldn't, like, I wouldn't ever recommend... I mean, maybe Winds of Change. Winds of Change coming out of factions probably works, but for Hearts of the North and the Warring Crier and all that stuff, I don't really think that's a good pipeline. Another one from somebody who says, you mentioned that they were cagey about if there are new updates. I don't think that's unexpected. A lot of whether Guild Wars 1 will get anything bigger is contingent on convincing NCSoft that it's worth the investment. And for the publisher, who holds Arenanet's purse, the only thing that will convince them is cold, hard numbers. This reminds me of something Capcom pulled many years ago. They had an IP that's pretty much abandoned at this point called Darkstalkers, or Vampire Savior in Japan. Capcom straight up told everyone via press release when they made an anthology collection that if this sells well, they will consider a new entry. If it did not, they will continue to ignore it. Wow, I love that candor, if that's really what happened. Long story short, it didn't sell well for a number of reasons. Many people speculated Capcom essentially set it up for failure because of how low effort the anthology was. So Capcom could easily point and go, see, you guys said you were interested, and you didn't bother paying for another time for the same game you bought before, and so they had a convenient excuse to continue not to give a shit about the series. Now, I don't think Arenanet is as scummy as Capcom is, but NCSoft is definitely capable of pulling that. Koreans famously call them their version of EA. Nexon gets that label as well. Someone on Arenanet's Guild Wars 1 division might have begged NCSoft for the chance, and this, unfortunately, might be their Darkstalkers moment if it goes poorly. Look, guys, I've been covering this a long time. I do not feel badly about NCSoft in their capacity as the publisher for Arenanet. They have never seen overly scummy. They have never seen overly restrictive. I think Guild Wars has always been excellent about its business model. Everyone I've ever spoken to, any interview I've ever seen from people at Arenanet has been pleasant and nice and comfortable and happy about NCSoft. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's obviously what they would say, right? I'm just not on board with this conspiracy. I'm really not. I think there is a serious, earnest attempt to see if there's some money that can be made out of Guild Wars 1, and then yes, I think they will justify putting more in there. And by the way, we're already at the start of this process. This is what the 20th anniversary was. At the 20th anniversary, we were sitting here saying, guys, spend money on this sale, prove that there's money to be made, and they can justify further development. And that's what this is. They are explicitly saying, spurred on by what happened with the 20th anniversary. So congrats. And look, I would love to sit here and say, okay, so do it again. It's just that for me, I wish that Reforged came out with a bigger offering. I know it's a chicken and an egg thing, but I think a commitment to some content would have been a huge signal flare for me and would have gone a long way. The fact that they didn't do that, they didn't take that risk, they didn't take that step, that's unfortunate, I think. Maybe you guys think it's not realistic, and that's fair too, but I really wish that they had found a way to do that. What I'm most concerned about is, like, there's a lot of people that have tuned in for the Reforged announcement, realize that it's not actually that big, and then when there is a real content announcement, they're going to think it's small potatoes again. They're going to think it's small. They won't trust that it's a real announcement, and you know, we can only ring this bell once, so to speak, and I just hope people are still paying attention if and when that next thing comes. Speaking of next things, here's Zidaneric, who says, one thing that would bring the community back would be a Reforged statue in the Hall of Monuments that also unlocks a new title and a new infusion in Guild Wars 2. If they really want the player base, that would be a quick and easy step to boost player numbers, and then from there they can trickle in new content. But I'm with you on this. We've been promised things from Arenanet in the past. The iPad app and the Polymock Arena come to mind. The community need to hold them accountable if they don't support it properly this time. Okay, look, I do agree Hall of Monuments is a good place to go, especially since there's some improvements with that now on the back end with Steam. And I'm a big believer, yeah, in integration between the two clients. Like I said, you know, shared friends list, stuff like that would be very fun and very exciting. I swear, and I probably shouldn't say this because I don't fully remember and I have no evidence for it, but I swear there was a bug at one point in Guild Wars 2 where you could open your friends list and see people that were in Guild Wars 1. I swear there was. Anyway, stuff like that I think would be excellent player base bump, and that doesn't run the risk of contaminating the world and changing the story and blah, 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 blah. So I think that that's maybe one of the first ports that they'll stop at. We'll see. As for this other stuff, holding them accountable to the extended experience iPad app and the Polymock Arena, oh, man. We got to let it go, guys. I think most people have let it go. I'm kind of mind blown to see someone here in nearly 2026 suggesting that this is a studio that doesn't make do on their promises. I think Arenanet is pretty goddamn good about not misleading people with expectations, generally speaking. I mean, you have managed to cherry pick two of the only examples that are fairly minor in, like, over 20 years of game development here. I'm not salty about that one, but, you know, call me a fanboy if you like. I've got a really good comment here that it kind of puts me in the spotlight, and I think it's fair. This is from Zach, who says, to be fair, WP, in the past, you've criticized Arenanet for a lack of marketing and not understanding how to generate hype for their games. At least this announcement is doing that. You could argue that bundling a few minor updates together that are similar in scope to those received by the game in the past and announcing a Reforged product isn't good marketing because it isn't honest, but it is aggressive and it is generating hype. Arenanet needs to just be careful not to become the studio that cries wolf. Yeah, so it is a bit of a catch-22. You're totally right. I do criticize them for not going big enough with their announcements. And now on the occasion that they finally have, I'm still not satisfied. Yeah, that's putting pressure from both ends. And maybe I should rein off on that. Maybe I'll just never be satisfied unless there's the content there. And I'm not particularly apologetic for that stance either. On a similar topic here, these two ended up having a huge fight in the YouTube comments. I won't read it all. Nathan says, I think the official video was really poorly thought out as a communication tool. The fact that most people think that standalone remaster almost proves that on its own. The mention of UI changes is not supported by any of the visuals in the trailer or further details. The only thing that is straightforward enough is the Steam Deck support. Even the controller support feels way too vague to be announced like that. And I happen to completely agree with that. You can see I put a thumbs up on that comment in the early hours. Greytalk comes in and says, no, it was really well thought out as a communication tool. The whole point is to get people hyped and get them back in the game so they actually can have a new player base which will generate revenue and justify new content. If they had just plainly said that it was a simple little update, nobody would care. And Nathan says, and that's a good and perfectly acceptable thing, incentivizing bad communication and mass manipulation just to get people in the door. We want that from Arenanet. And I have to say, I can't help but nod along with that. I don't think that they should do that. Do I think that they were deliberately deceptive and it was like a Machiavellian scheme to delude people into getting in the game? Do I think that they've made a major mistake here? I don't know. But I will say, I don't think that the update is big enough to justify the title and the new key art and the attempt at a new trailer and a new name on Steam. It feels like, Guild Wars Reforged to me kind of works as like a patch name, Like how when we had the new player experience patch, or maybe even when you think about a season patch, Flame and Frost or whatever. Kind of feels like that, except we know it's more than that. They're updating the, the login screen and the Steam name and everything. So let me throw that back at you guys in the comments. Leave it in the comments of this video. Where's the line? And yeah, I'm being really non-committal and lame with my response here. All right, a couple of very quick fire questions here to round out the video. I can't believe the runtime's got so long. Talking about conspiracies, this was hilarious to me. KX Mode says, the Guild Wars Reforged website body font strikes me as odd. It's using Fritz Squad, which basically is the same as World of Warcraft's Fritz Quadra font. Blizzard released Warcraft 3 Reforged using that style, so it definitely makes me wonder. Ooh, yeah. Wonder what? Wonder what? What is the conspiracy here? That 2 weeks of the marketing guys are Blizzard insiders seeking to sabotage Guild Wars 2? Sorry, just the Guild Wars franchise because they're salty that ultimately Arenanet had made the better game. Blizzard got all the money, but Arenanet, they made the true art, and so now they're, sticking the knife in. Well, I mean, what is the conspiracy here? What, the same marketing guys were responsible for both and they've learned nothing? I really don't know what this is suggesting. But Jesus Christ, you guys I thought I was nitpicky. You guys are looking at the font. Winding Twilight says, I 200% read the title, Guild Wars Reforged, and I thought Guild Wars 1 with jumping. And I sadly know for sure it's not 200%. It's 200% not Guild Wars 1 with jumping. This was funny. I've seen a few people mention this. A real blast from the past, and it's so easy for me to forget this, but a priority for a lot of people is the ability to jump. There's a jump emote, guys. Put it on a macro. Actually, was that against TOS to have a one button that types /jump for you? Maybe don't put it on a macro. Type /jump and you'll be fine. Yeah, I don't know. It's that would be kind of a fun, novel thing for them to have done on the default control layout, just to put the emote on that. It would have felt clunky as shit, though. It doesn't matter, guys, right? If I was going to write up a list of 100 things I'd like to see happen after Reforged releases, jumping would not be on that list. But maybe it should be, because there is a mass market desire for it, right? And speaking of which, here's a nice comment to round out our coverage of Reforged, until it actually releases. This is from Reap the Whirlwind, who says, I don't expect any truly new content before April. Adding in new quests for the 21st anniversary feels right, and that's when most expats log in to relive their youth. I would love some quests that involve the heroes we met in Nightfall and Eye of the North, like Can we accompany Sasuke on his travels in Alona to meet with the Jin? That tidbit while doing my Weaver quests made me a bit misty-eyed. I think you've got a really good point. You know, it's funny, rewind the clock to the 20th anniversary, and I was disappointed that it was scaled back a little bit from the 10th in terms of, you know, like the new elite skills and stuff. And I was thinking, you know, what's next? Do we have to wait for the 25th? Do we have to wait for the 30th? I want something on the 21st, and it felt like there was no hope for that, you know? Like, I watched a Doombox video this morning, and he was expressing a similar sentiment, that it felt like the 20th anniversary this April was the end, like, for realsies, the end. And you couldn't have, you know, blamed people for feeling that way. But now, you know, suddenly I think, could we do... Is that an idea? Anniversary content updates? The 21st anniversary does feel like the next major date to me. It's got enough padding and leeway, right, for Reforged to come out to then look at other things. Maybe they'll get bogged down with it with a Switch port as well, which would not be very exciting for us already in the audience, right? Until we see the fruits of the money from all the new people coming in. But yeah, maybe. I actually do have a bit of belief on the 21st. And we'll see what they do. You know, we can maybe start drafting up those lists of things we're excited about again. That is truly where the Reforged announcement is most thrilling. So there you go, guys. Thank you very much for watching. It's nice to sit down and do a classic-style Q&A. Obviously, I do a lot of live back and forth. If you've been missing it, I am constantly making content. People just don't see it. It's over on the live tab. Come join me for the conclusion of the Visions of Eternity LP, where I'm sure lots of this stuff will come up. And yeah, drop your comments below. I'll be reading as I always do. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon.